The great debate, subcutaneous injections of TRT versus intramuscular injections of TRT. Yeah, look, I'm going to break it down in this video, what I think is better, what the scientific literature says, and I'm going to give you guys the answer to why, in weird cases, SubQ equals higher estrogen. Yes, it is true that subcutaneous injections of testosterone do work, and yes, it is true that they raise testosterone levels rather quickly and to pretty high levels. So the argument's always been, oh, look, SubQ works, but there's a caveat. Steady state, continuous release of testosterone, higher estrogen. Ultimately higher testosterone usually as well. And that, my friends, considering doses confuse people, can confuse people. I'm not saying SubQ is bad, good, IM is better. I'm going to get to all that. But in this video, I'm going to break it down and get down to definitive scientific literature and definitive reasons why SubQ may work or SubQ may not work for people, or IM might be better for people. So sit tight, strap in, because you're going to get the answer to which is better, SubQ or IM. In the meantime, guys, you've got 2 more days until these specials go by the wayside and they are no more. 20% off supercharged dopamine and nootropics mastery. Code for that is 20 now. Cortex stack 25% off for another 2 days. Code for that is 25 Cortex. Torque nootropics stack 25% off for 2 more days. Code for that is 25 Torque. All right, these specials that have been going on since the beginning of New Year and throughout the month of January are ending Friday. All right, so you got to get it in as soon as possible. So right off the bat, I'm going to take you to a scientific study, which I'll give you the title in a second so that you can go look it up yourself if you're interested in reading about this, where we're talking about the DHT and estradiol profile of subcutaneous testosterone enanthate injections. And it actually has a comparison in terms of estradiol to a different dose of intramuscular injections. I'm going to get to why this is important here in a second. Here's the really critical part, okay? The C average 0 to 168 hours. 168 hours is 7 full days. For E2, in the 200 milligram intramuscular testosterone enanthate group was comparable with that of the 100 milligram subcutaneous testosterone enanthate group, reaching 50 picograms per milliliter. So what does that tell us? This is a paper that is titled Pharmacokinetic Profile of Subcutaneous Testosterone Enanthate Delivered via Novel Prefilled Syringe Use Autoinjector, a phase 2 study. What this means is that injecting 100 milligrams, okay, at one bolus dose of subcutaneous testosterone enanthate, so doing it subcutaneously in the fat tissue, yielded the same amount of estradiol at 50 picograms per milliliter as intramuscularly injecting testosterone enanthate at 200 milligrams. So one would look at that and go, okay, great. Well, that means I have to take less subcutaneous testosterone, like the dose should be lower compared to intramuscular testosterone. And the answer to that question is yes, you're right. This is why you're seeing posts like this, SubQ, higher E2, higher aromatization, where people in the comment section are going, yes, verified by lab measurements. It is very individual. Here's a guy, yes, double the E2 and half the test. Not really sure why half the test, but we'll get to that, but double the E2. Again, another guy, yes, E2 shot through the roof when switching to SubQ daily, 49 picograms per milliliter to 85 picograms per milliliter. Now, what is happening in these situations? What I would wager is that because subcutaneous injections ultimately end up giving you more serum testosterone because there is no trough, so androgens just get to build up, that you've got more steady state continuous conversion to testosterone's metabolites like DHT and estradiol. So with subcutaneous injections, yes, they absolutely do work. For some guys, they raise testosterone higher than the same dose of intramuscular injections, but ultimately, usually, even though if you're doing it every day, you get a more steady kind of release of testosterone, you have a steady, a less peaky kind of high point of estradiol, the serum concentration of estradiol is usually higher if you're doing SubQ at the same dose that you were running intramuscular. And that is the one thing that, the TRT clinics, the new agey people, like the anti-aging folks who are predominantly the advocates for subcutaneous administration of testosterone cypionate or testosterone enanthate, this is what those guys have gotten wrong. The contention is if you're doing SubQ injections and you're doing them frequently, well, then you're going to have less estrogen. And that's just not I would say it's not necessarily true. It could be true in some people who don't aromatize a lot, but generally speaking, it is not true. Subcutaneous injections keep more testosterone around. You're in a constant peak. You're really never in a trough in these states. And thus, think about the action of aromatase in adipose tissue. You've simply got more continuous stream of androgen converting to estradiol. That doesn't mean that SubQ is bad, because like if you're 150 milligrams intramuscular twice a week or something, and you want to switch to 150 milligrams twice a week, the subcutaneous, you'd probably just dose it at 120, maybe 125, and you'd level out with, no peaks and troughs. You'd be at a constant peak, basically, where your mood would probably be very stable. If that's the ideal estradiol number for you, wherever that lands, then libido and the sex part of TRT will probably be stable, and you'll generally feel good. So I'm not advocating SubQ. I'm just saying you have to understand the dose conversion. It is different. Here's another post titled SubQ versus IM and aromatization. He basically was saying, look, I was on intramuscular 140 milligrams test C, so that's cypionate, every other day. The results from that were total T7 25, estrogen 71 picograms per milliliter. Since then, this is important, this guy lost 30 pounds and changed to a TRT clinic, and they put him on SubQ, 150 milligrams, so slightly more, test enanthate every fourth day. And this is where these were the results. Testosterone total 865 nanograms per deciliter, estradiol 127 picograms per milliliter. He's confused. He goes, it's strange to me because I've lost quite a lot of fat in between the two results and also put on some muscle, yet my estrogen is way higher. Like, what's going on here? Well, first of all, the dose was increased from 140 intramuscular to 150 subcutaneous. But again, as we saw in that paper, and rings true in all of these examples, and again, people just parroting SubQ is better on Reddit, etc., seem to just not have read the literature or not quite understanding the pharmacokinetics specifically. The problem here is you've got testosterone sitting in adipose tissue. It takes longer to metabolize. Okay, great. However, it's converting more to estradiol. Yeah, you might have more testosterone. This guy does at 865, but first of all, more test usually is going to equal more estradiol. But in this case, it's not even, it's disproportionate. It's a little bit more test with substantially more estrogen. Another comment on this post, like many have stated, SubQ made my E2 skyrocket, almost triple what it was on IM. This just showed me that these TR clinics and YouTube experts have no idea what they're talking about. Find yourself a good endocrinologist. Okay, so no, again, I'm not advocating for IM versus SubQ. I have many clients and I have seen many people, and I've read many anecdotals of people doing SubQ, and it worked perfectly for them. So long as estrogen was in the right place, and so long as the deliverability, really the pharmacokinetics of the subcutaneous testosterone injection allowed them to reach levels of testosterone that were therapeutic for them. But you must understand that it's a different profile in terms of absorption, distribution, and particularly how, the testosterone converts to its metabolites. One thing that this guy, so let's talk about intramuscular injections for a second, said is find yourself a good endocrinologist. Now, if you look at the history of testosterone injections and you talk to any endocrinologist or endocrinologically savvy individual in the context of testosterone replacement therapy, there is no SubQ. Okay, there's no subcutaneous, there's no SubQ on the labels, there's not even any notion of subcutaneous dosing, especially with endocrinologists. It's strictly deep intramuscular injections. That's what it's studied for. Historically, that's where we have the most data. We have far more anecdotals of intramuscular injection versus SubQ. It may be somewhat evening out now, but I mean, it's still disproportionate in favor of intramuscular. And in terms of sheer amount of scientific papers on SubQ versus TRT, there's like 2 on SubQ. Okay. Every single other paper, which is as an estimate, 500 plus, probably 1,000 plus, is all intramuscular administration of testosterone. What is my personal take on the matter? Okay, so you've got all this scientific literature, you have the history of endocrinology, you have 99 out of 100 endocrinologists that are going to suggest intramuscular administration of testosterone versus subcutaneous. You have, on the other side, you've got 2 studies, you've got anti-aging folks, and then you have like TRT clinics and doctors who obviously want to ride the new wave or want to be sort of on the new popular, somewhat trendy thing because they think that that's cool or whatever, that have this idea that SubQ mimics diurnal rhythms. This is not true. Subcutaneous injections of testosterone in no way, shape, or form mimic diurnal rhythm, because subcutaneous injections of testosterone equals steady state, constant peak, therefore more aromatization, albeit maybe less levels than your bolus of an IM injection. This in no way, steady state androgens, steady state peak of androgens, you know, steady conversion to metabolites, this in no way mimics diurnal natural testosterone secretion. It just doesn't. I'll talk about my personal experience because I think this is important for that to weigh in aside from the scientific stuff, because you're going to see people on Reddit, and you're probably going to talk to people, if you actually know real people in real life that are on TRT, that have a great time doing SubQ. Okay, so you got to remember that. I'm not advocating for one versus the other. People do fine on SubQ, and that's totally fine. Personally though, when I've seen a guy on a TRT protocol not respond specifically relating to the sex, libidos, erection quality, nocturnal erections, morning wood, you know, generally having sex drive, the interest in sex, sensation, right? Climaxability. When people are having a difficult time achieving that, despite estradiol numbers being in range or close to in range when they're on SubQ, when I suggest that they go on an intramuscular administration, every other day, every third day, every day is fine too if you're doing ventroglutes like shallow IM or maybe delts or something. The derangement in their libido, even though testosterone was high and DHT was normal and estradiol was like controlled or in range, suddenly after a short period of time usually, but you know, you give it 4 to 6 weeks for things to balance out and you to reach somewhat of a steady state or your body get used to these levels of hormones. You've got androgen receptor binding as well as estrogen receptor binding from conversion of androgens in the brain, and that affects libido. Usually these guys have a resolution of their sexual symptoms. So libido comes back, erections come back, they're more masculine, they're a little bit stronger in the gym, they're horny, there's more spontaneous erections. So what is it about intramuscular injections that is resolving the sex stuff in guys that can't get libido and erections on point on subcutaneous injections? My position on this, so what I think is happening based on the pharmacokinetics of testosterone injected intramuscularly, is simply that you've got a faster uptake through blood vessels in muscles. Yes, the ester still has to get cleaved off, but if there's a more bolus amount going into the liver at once, the ester gets cleaved off, well then there's going to be a more bolus amount that's entering the bloodstream. Even if you're injecting every day intramuscular versus, you know, SubQ every day, you're going to end up with more of a load, right? More of a bolus, even if you're injecting every day, of testosterone than if you did SubQ, because there's like little amounts being distributed and then constantly being cleaved off and then sent to the bloodstream, binding to receptors with SubQ. Whereas with IM, I mean, again, you're getting a rapid uptake. This is why guys will switch to SubQ and be like, I just kind of, I'm feeling mad, I'm not feeling myself, I have less energy, and then of course the libido and the sex stuff goes away. But you'll see these anecdotals of guys going back on IM and they're like, within 24 hours, I felt better. And science can't explain this, or at least you think it can't explain it, but why do they feel better, right? More rapid uptake, better deliverability. Again, you're hitting blood vessels in the muscle tissue versus subcutaneous tissue, which you need to actually be active. Metabolic factors influence the kind of metabolism of, you know, that testosterone in the subcutaneous tissue. Whereas you're injecting it directly into a muscle, you know, you're not going to have to go work out in order for that to uptake. You've got blood vessels to do that. It does it automatically. My personal experience, okay, so I've been on various doses of testosterone, and I have done both injection frequency, all three actually, subcutaneous injections, deep intramuscular injections, and shallow intramuscular injections. And what works best for me, specifically in terms of daily energy and in terms of the sex, libido, erections, all that stuff, is intramuscular injections. The difference between shallow intramuscular and regular intramuscular is not very vast, not even much that I can actually pinpoint in myself personally. So like, you know, a subcutaneous everyday administration method, right, of a dose that keeps my estradiol within range and gets me therapeutic levels of testosterone, I have less libido and erection quality and nocturnal erections and like the whole sexual side of TRT than on an equivalent dose or a dose that gets me in range of estradiol and keeps me therapeutic on testosterone injected shallow intramuscularly. I'm not telling you, this is the final point that I want to make. I'm not telling you that one is better than the other, or that you should inject intramuscularly or do shallow IM versus SubQ. If SubQ is working for you and the sex part is good and the energy is good, please do me a favor and stay right there with a protocol that works. That's another huge point. If a protocol works, do not change it. But, you know, the answer to the question of why is this large contingent of men having issues on SubQ, and why do people have libido issues and erection issues on SubQ and energy issues or whatever, or higher aromatization? Well, now you have the answer. You know, SubQ is consistent, steady state of androgens and therefore steady estradiol. And though it may not peak super high, you're constantly converting to estrogen. Whereas with an intramuscular injection, you're going to, you know, peak in your testosterone, you're going to convert to the metabolites, but those metabolites aren't going to stay elevated as long as they would stay elevated on SubQ. So at the tissue side and the receptor binding side and the genetic activity that is post receptor binding, this is where all of this matters, which never gets brought into the conversation, which confuses me. With a quick bolus and then aromatase grabbing some of that testosterone, converting it into estrogen, but then you don't have this steady state of androgens, well, you're ultimately not going to have a consistent flow of estradiol. So it's going to lower. And the effect in tissues from not a steady state of estradiol, but a somewhat peak, and then ultimately a trough of estradiol, seems to have men fare better in terms of libido, sensation, even orgasm quality, erections, energy, muscle building, all that kind of stuff on testosterone. So in the end, not to leave you with a last ambivalent note to keep you confused about what to do, but truthfully, you're going to have to pick your poison. Like, some people do better on SubQ, some people do better on IM. That's why TRT and dialing in your protocol is an absolute dance. But the more educated you are, and the more that you don't feed into any one ideology, because that's what a lot of this is, and you stick strictly scientific and operate from labs, the better you're going to be in your TRT protocol. But as I said in the beginning, guys, this is the last chance, well, today and tomorrow, for you to get 20% off Supercharged Dopamine, the course, as well as Nootropics Mastery. The code for that is 20 now, and this ends Friday. Torque Stack, the emperor of nootropics, one of the most purchased nootropic stacks on the internet, all day energy, motivation, and focus. My brainchild, 25% off right now for only 2 more days. Code for that is 25 Torque. Same thing with the Cortex stack. Cortex is a pretty stimulant, Adderall-like nootropic, but it also induces a focus and a flow effect. I built it that way. 25% off for 2 more days. Code for that is 25 Cortex. Lastly, relevant to all this TRT stuff, look, if you are on TRT and you just struggle to get your protocol dialed in, you like to run your labs by me, your situation by me, and have me formulate a protocol for you based on what you're telling me, what you should do moving forward. And this is based on all the data that I have from clients, from the scientific literature, from myself. Hire me. I do consulting on TRT protocol optimization. It's one of the major things that I do, and it's one of the most enjoyable things I do, because when you set someone straight on a protocol and they feel great and the sex is great, they'll thank you forever, and it's a good feeling. Hire me in under a minute at livecortex.com. All right, everybody, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you. Hope you're having a great week. Like the video if you liked anything that I said. Sub to the channel, because I really think you're going to love the content that comes out of here if you're new. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one.